Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome to the Healthy Muslim in Ramadan. The journey on the importance of health to the Muslim takes us now to the time of the Prophet and how important maintaining health was to the companions and to those who were close to the Prophet, even though it may not have applied to the more general population. The remedies and healings that were obtained at that time were not through any miraculous instruction to the Prophet, peace be upon him. He had, of course, a great intelligence. He observed very carefully. He was very knowledgeable. He took the knowledge not from the Quran, where there are absolutely no specific instructions about medicine except the famous one about the bee, about the healing contained in the yellow substance from the belly of the bee. But apart from honey, the Quran is very quiet about specific ways by which we might be healed other than prayer. But we must use our intelligence, therefore. And at the time of the Prophet, there was already a rich tribal tradition of treatment, some of which, of course, involved alcohol, which was specifically forbidden by the Prophet. Any intoxicant, even if it was to be used for good, may not be used. We're talking about alcohol to be used internally. Even in modern times, we use alcohol as a swab to clean the skin, and Muslims would not object to that because it's not absorbed through the skin in the quantities supplied. But alcohol ingested is forbidden. Also, you cannot kill an animal for the purpose of obtaining a medicine. Frogs were used in those times as medicines, and the Prophet absolutely instructed you may not kill a frog. So many of the medicines that were popular were in fact banned for that reason. The fact of illness was considered a blessing. We've already discussed our attitude, what we've learned from the Prophet and the way he treated people who were sick, and our attitude to sick people. It's clear in the Quran, in Al-Nur, it's no fault in the blind, nor in one born lame, nor in one afflicted with illness. So, because they're not considered to be people who are to be blamed for what has happened to them, they are already in a state of purification. And because of this, the sick person does not need to fast, and he also doesn't need to fight. He's obviously not fit to fight, but they're not considered as people who should feel that they've let the side down, as it were, because they can't join the army. In Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, and if any of you who are ill and who has an ailment in his scalp should in compassion either fast or feed the poor, they don't have to go on the pilgrimage where it's necessary to shave the head. They can have an excuse not to. So the sick pilgrim is respected in this regard. The complete understanding of illness was very profound, actually. It's something that we've lost in the West, and I'll be talking about it later. But then, illness was seen as a lack of balance, that something that you were doing had thrown the whole of your system out of balance. And as part of that balance, the heart, the spiritual heart, and the emotions were involved. There was a lot of kindness shown to sick people and a lot of human understanding, because if you didn't heal the disease of the heart, the illness would itself not be healed. This emphasis is something we've lost, and we've got to get back to it. And basically, anything that takes you back, takes you away from the purity of the understanding of your dependence on your Lord, will help your illness to stay out of balance. There are medicines which are specific for every illness. This was part of the tradition of the Greeks and the Indians, and these traditions were known to the Bedou, and were known because, remember, these were people who travelled. They had ships, they had a trade route, they went to India, they went as far as China, and they brought back the wisdom with the goods that they had bartered. And the compendiums that are left of the specific treatments that are given, some of them show great wisdom even now. But they were very specific, each one for each illness. And it's quite interesting looking at the list of things that were considered very important in those days. Headache, back pain, hemorrhoids, miscarriage. The list goes on, but these are the human afflictions of people which, you know, if you've got bad piles, it's a problem if you're sitting on a camel. It's not easy, and you cry and you ask for help. And they had very clever ways of dealing with it. They understood balance in treatment, something that came from the Greeks. In Bukhari, it's quoted that the Prophet said, "Fever is from hell, put it out with water." But that was in the Greeks as well. The Prophet said, "For every illness there is a cure. If the cure matches the illness, the improvement will take place with the permission of Allah." The illness has to be specific. But in the traditional medicine, it wasn't like us. We now go to a chemist, we say, "I've got a headache." Person gets a headache pill. And maybe there are 2 or 3 different headache pills. But the chemist doesn't say what kind of headache you've got. He just offers you the choice. They're different words. He doesn't have any knowledge that this kind of headache would be better for this pill. Or, by the way, I want to know the balance. Is your tongue dry or moist? Is your stomach uncomfortable? Are your bowels fast or slow? These questions aren't asked. They're all relevant to a headache. Something like 50% of headaches are caused by constipation. Does the chemist ever ask you? Probably not. You don't need paracetamol. You need something for your tummy. This was known by the traditional healers. And it came from the Greeks. It came from very early medicine, which is still practiced in the Ayurvedic tradition. It's clear from all of this that it's absolutely halal to take medicine. Only the greatest saints can patronize, if you like, their family and say, "I'll take the medicine," because they have such tawakkul. They know that a ginger concoction isn't going to help them. I've seen great sheikhs, very holy people. When they have a cold, they're very happy to receive a concoction of ginger and honey and lemon and pepper to help their cough. By the way, it works. It's an awful lot better than anything Boots can give you. Boots, by the way, is a chemist in London. It's a good chemist. But that concoction is better than anything that a pharmaceutical chemist will offer you in a bottle at great expense. It also tastes better. But when you take the medicine, remember always to depend on Allah, who has intended this medicine for you, who has intended this medicine for your benefit. My dear friend Gay Eaton, who in India had this terrible hepatitis, and his sheikh wouldn't bother to see him because he said, I was so pleased for you that your illness was such a benefit and a purification. Please come back after the break. This is fun. Welcome back. We must continue our exploration of the medicine that was available at the time of the Prophet. It's clear that he wanted people to seek medicine. O servants of God, seek medical treatment, for God has established a remedy for every malady, clear to whoever knows it and unclear to whoever does not know it. The medicine and the physician is merely the vehicle by which Allah achieves his healing. But within that, we must try and apply our guile, our intelligence, and our clear observation. The patient likes to be observed, so these tendernesses are all helpful to him. At the time of the Prophet, diet was extremely important. On one occasion, he went to see Ali, who had been ill with an upset tummy, and the food that had been prepared was about to be given to him. And the Prophet said, no, you must not eat that, and ordered whoever was cooking to prepare a very simple gruel with barley. Barley was a very important ingredient of the diet of the Muslim Ummah at that time. The stomach was considered the well of the body, and the veins drink from it. And if it was healthy, the veins passed on good health. And if it wasn't healthy, the veins passed on poison. So the diet was absolutely essential in the cure of an illness, at the immediate cure, the longer term recovery, and health maintenance. We've lost that understanding, and I'm glad that earlier I was discussing with you the detail in Ramadan of how you will come to understand what foodstuffs are, how each one is different from another, and you will extend this small beginning of wisdom into your lives, because food is the natural medicine we take every day to sustain our body in the strongest possible way. Of course, food isn't just about food choices, although food choices were very sophisticated at the time of the Prophet. They also were extremely careful about hygiene. Food was covered. People washed their hands before cooking and before eating. Remember, this was the year 700. In the 18th century in England, people didn't wash their hands before eating. All that time later, we're talking about a long time ago, and the deep wisdom that was known by these desert people at that time. Please don't assume that just because somebody's living in a tent in the desert, that they don't have extreme intelligence. I learnt this early on in my international medical career when I met a lady who had been a Bedou. And I observed her in a very complicated day, giving instructions and speaking to lots of people, telling people to come back next year, come to me on the 16th of July at 4 o'clock, and to another one, come to me on August the 2nd at 3 o'clock. Every group of people she met, she knew their names, she knew the names of the brother, uncle. This is very traditional in the Arab world, but it's also quite hard. This lady saw about 10 families a day and did so most days. That's 300 times 10. That's a lot of families, that's a lot of names. I keep the 3,000 names I know, not as many as she did, in my computer. I have to remind myself. I don't remember. And I asked her where her PA was. She said, "What's a PA?" I said, "Well, where's your appointment diary?" She said, "What's an appointments diary?" She was illiterate. She just remembered. She laughed. She said, "You've got a weak brain. You can't remember anything, so you have to write it down." She says, "I can't write, so I remember it. My brain's much stronger as a result." That is absolutely true. And that was the intelligence at the time of the prophets. They were brighter then than we were, much brighter. We've got weak brains now. And so you shouldn't attribute your own weakness to them. You should understand these people were capable of remembering things in a way we will never understand. There were individuals who were recognized to be doctors. There was a woman who had become skilled through traveling in her knowledge of herbs and her knowledge of traditional medicine. And the Prophet was happy with her and allowed her to teach his wives so that they could use her methods in cooking, food preparation, and in the preparation of medicine. She was such a close friend that sometimes for his afternoon nap, he would go to her house, and there was a special corner he would lie in, and she would cover him. The covering she gave to him, she passed on to her family, and it exists to this day. After his death, she was appointed the health and safety expert for the marketplace. Remember, the marketplace was an important forum of social gathering, and to be the person in charge of the organization of that, which included obviously the fact that it had to have clean water, that the sewers had to be covered, that there was no sense of any source of any dirt or anything that could promote disease. She was knowledgeable about that. So women in those times, women doctors, I call her the first woman doctor, and I'm delighted to know that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had a woman doctor. That's kind of cool for me. He also had a man doctor, I can't deny that, who lived in Taif and was much traveled, and his knowledge of the medicine of the East formed part of the knowledge that was passed on to the people around the Prophet. The medicine the Prophet used himself came a lot from food, and he would use, obviously, honey. That was incredibly important. But he would enjoy and encourage the use of pepper, the use of honey, the use of dates, the use of vinegar, fish, ginger. All of these were known to have specific medical powers. Onions, olive oil, henna, senna for the tummy, aloes for soothing. This was a deep traditional wisdom. But there were practices as well. They used bloodletting. They did cupping. There had been a long practice of black magic, and the false gods would be supplicated by the use of amulets and various other things, which of course were immediately stopped by the Prophet, because anything that does not no power can influence the power of Allah other than the messenger as a supplicant. But there is no power except from Allah. So all of the false gods and the healing prayers to them and the healing practices associated with them were immediately banned. But they were replaced by a tradition which is still alive today of healing prayers from the Quran, healing dua, which can be put in an amulet wrapped up in leather, and they're a reminder. They have no power of themselves, but they're a reminder that we can do something, that by having that we can remember to pray, we can remember to hope that by putting a hand on the amulet that prayer will have benefit. The intermediary of prayer through water through paper, through material, was also considered appropriate. So you could write a prayer, a supplication from the Quran or a dua. You could write that on paper, onto water. You could use senna, you could use many different forms of intermediary, like lemon juice or olive oil. These things would be the vehicle of the message on the paper, not of power in themselves, but the paper could then be placed on the injured part, or the water could be drunk, and in that would be healing. These intermediary practices were present at the time of the Prophet and were accepted by him. There were other fascinating practices way before Jannah, way before the 18th century, where we started to understand something about hygiene. You were well advised not to go close to a person with a fever. You had to stay 2 swords' length away from them in case you caught the fever. Even recently, the Middle Eastern SARS, called MERS, went to America, where the Americans didn't know. You don't shake hands with someone who might have come and be transmitted an infectious illness. I'm very glad to report the American didn't get sick. I'm so glad. Allah loves the Americans. I'm trying not to be facetious. Assalamu alaikum. Please come again to our next program.